So, as he said, my name is Eddie, and I'm a potter. I like to play with dirt because I like to joke around with people. There's three basic main forms of ceramics. There's wheel throwing stuff, which I like to do. There's sculpture, and there's hand built stuff, and I'll talk a little bit about some of that. So, I took my first ceramics class with Suzanne in 2017, and quickly fell in love with the endless possibilities. I just like taking like I said, off of dirt basically, and making something that you use every day. Like most of us use coffee cups to get through the mornings. So a little bit about myself. I talked about I started in 2017. I'm legally blind. I don't use that as I don't let it hinder me in any way. But what most people can see from 400 feet, I have to be 20 feet from it. So that's just a little bit about my vision. In my short career in ceramics so far, I've experimented with multiple different things, from standard oxidation firings to wood firing, and then raku. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute, but for now I'm going to talk about some of my earlier stuff. So these all range from 2017 to 18. This is a tea set that was hand built, and the cups were thrown and then added some texture afterwards. This was from my first semester as a art major. These are called twin towers. So each semester in the art program we don't get an assignment, we make our own assignments, and so we have to come up with something that our professors deem worthy enough for a semester's worth of work. And I wanted to create two totems out of wood-blown pieces and do some drawings on them. This was I call these twin towers to represent me and my brothers. Some of you may know I have a twin brother. You look at them, it's like, oh, they're so similar, but when you get up and study them, there's a lot of differences in them. This next one is, just a detailed shot against a black backdrop. It shows the pots better. This guy is a sculpture from my second semester in the art program, where I did a series on depression and how the thoughts creeping from behind, and there's a door on the top of its head with a ladder escaping, like the thoughts going in and out of your head. These two towers are also from that same show, and the way I visioned this was this person was like reaching out, trying to help, but the bridge is not secure and it's not an easy path, but you can still make it across. And then that's a detailed shot from the closed door. And some of my current stuff that I'm doing now, this is a pot that was glazed, and one of my favorite combinations of glazes. So when glazing, you can apply the glaze differently. There's so many different variables to get a finished piece. Like, you can put it on too thick or too thin, or you can put this color over this color and you'll get this. And some people think it's like paint, which it isn't. It's a lot of chemistry involved, which I'm not up on. And this is a planter that I've made with a different glaze on it, and it's also sitting right here. This was, a higher fire, which I'll talk about in a minute. And then this is some of my raku stuff, which is what I'm doing this semester for seminar. Raku is a process that usually involves removing the pots from the kiln. At this semester, I've been firing to 1,750 degrees. So I'm taking them out, they're glowing red hot, and you put them into a bucket or a barrel of combustible materials, and you let it catch fire, and then you start with oxygen, and it creates really bright, vivid colors in a process called, reduction. So a definition I have of raku is, raku usually involves removing pottery from the kiln at bright red heat and place it into a container of combustible materials. Once the materials ignite, the containers are closed. This produces an intense reduction atmosphere which affects the colors and glazes in clay bodies. The pot has, anywhere there's not glaze, which you can't really see it on this one, anywhere where the pot doesn't have a glaze on it, it turns black from the carbon getting trapped inside the clay. And I'll talk about more of that in a second. This is another pot that has sodium silicate on it. And, I just applied it's also called liquid glass. So I just applied that to the pot and I dried it and then I stretched it, and that's what created the surface cracks in the pot. Okay, and this is just, one with the regular glaze on it and was raku'd. And then this one's also up here, for further inspection. And then this one I took and I masked off areas with tape to create, an interesting pattern, because where there's no glaze, it turns black, and then I applied a glaze called oxblood, which is that red, to get the red stripes. Now I'm going to talk about the creative process and what all goes into an everyday item that we all use. There's a lot that goes into it. And the first in my creative process is visual research, and this was a picture from a event called NCECA, which stands for the National Council on Education for the Ceramic Arts. Last February or March, we had the opportunity, me and a couple of friends drove to Pittsburgh. That's where the host city was that year. And there was over 6,000 potters there, so it was a blast. And they have vendors set up with different tables, and like all the big companies are there, and there's graduate schools there. So there's just like loads of information. There's talks it's like a 4-day event. There's different people talking about different things. Another thing you can get visual influences is from different potters. So this is a guy, his name's Tim C. He creates these illustrative pots and oil cans. And we was lucky enough to bring him in as a visiting artist at the beginning of the semester. So these two pictures are from that workshop. He spent 3 days here teaching us different techniques and how he creates his work and the stories behind it. And so another visual influence for me is a guy out of Asheville. His name is Akira Satake, and he creates these slab-built pots using a slip that's placed onto the pot and then stretched to create the surface texture. And then the next step for me would be sketching out. And when I'm sketching, I don't try to do no elaborate drawings, because I'm just, I'm trying to look at form and, how would this look here? How would that look there? And then, so these are my sketches for that red stripe pot I was showing earlier. And I like that. So then I go throwing. And then, so usually I weigh out my clay beforehand so I can try to throw consistently. And then, so that's a picture of the weighed out clay before, and then onto the wheel, and then me throwing. So, after the pot is thrown, it dries into a stage that we call leather hard, which, we use like a firm leather belt would be like the equivalent of the stage that it needs to be at for when I trim it, which is what I'm doing here. You can see the clay flying off. That's just to take down some of the thickness in the bottom of the pot so it's not so heavy, and you can really refine your form, and you can trim a foot ring into the bottom so it will sit flat. And then after that, we let it dry out into a stage called greenware, and it's just where all the moisture leaves the clay, and it's very brittle and fragile. And once that happens, we place it inside of the kiln for bisque firing. And what that does is just remove all the water from the clay, and it lets it take a glaze. So when I do a bisque fire, I'm firing to what we call column 04, and columns are just a temperature method that we use to, and it's just like a temperature chart. So, you know, the way I've been told is like it's a positive negative scale. So 05 is a lower temperature than 04, and then, you know, on the other side 1 is lower than 5, and so I bisque, like I said, the column 04, which equates to 1,945 degrees. The pot usually takes 7 to 8 hours to fire to completely get the temperature, and then it takes usually the same amount of time to cool down before I can take it out and start glazing. And so once it's out, like I said, I can start glazing. There's, you know, a few different methods of glazing. Right here I'm pouring, so I'll scoop out the glaze and I'll pour it into the pot and I'll swirl it around to get all the glaze on the inside. Then this is a standard oxidation glaze firing. A glaze is a mixture of chemicals and colorants that give a glass-like coating to the pot or vessel that it is applied to. So the difference between oxidation firing is usually done in an electric kiln, and the oxygen is free to interact with the glaze when firing. Oxidation firing only, oxidation fires allow bright colors, and reduction, which I'm going to talk about next, and like raku, you're preventing the oxygen from interacting with the glaze during the glaze, when the glaze is trying to mature.
2 minutes. 2 minutes, Edward.
Okay, thank you. So these are, you know, standard oxidation. These are raku. So this is a raku kiln. It has a crank where you can crank it up to remove the pots. Like I said, at 1,750 degrees. They're glowing hot and placed into a can of combustibles. When you're working with raku, it is very dangerous because you're opening with open flames and it's very unpredictable. So, you know, accidents can happen. So this is me placing it in the thing and then cooling it off. Like I said, accidents can happen. I burnt my hair this semester, so. And then what's next for me is I'm applying to grad schools and residencies and trying to, you know, find somewhere that I can continue my creative process and hone in on the craft that I love. And you know, if anyone has questions, I'll be happy to talk to you afterwards.
Great, thank you.